We never truly know what we will face when we enter this place. It's a gamble of sanity every time the heavy oak door swings inward. Today, however, was a deception of calm. The sheer, unexpected stillness was a terror in itself. The magnificent Persian rugs, whose intricate patterns normally seem to writhe with residual energy, lay flat and in place upon the creaky floorboards, mercifully untorn by claws or teeth. The rich walnut paneling of the walls, a feature that once denoted luxury, was unstained, free of the noxious ooze or gore that usually marked their last rampage. Even the opulent crystal chandeliers, despite their insistent, frantic flickering, were miraculously intact, their prisms scattering the sickly light across the pristine scene. This quiet perfection only amplified my dread. It felt like the drawn breath before a scream. I am certain that the vapors of the noxious history of this house have seeped their way past the surface, sinking into the very grain of the wood and becoming woven into the fibers of the carpets. This house is not merely old, it is saturated with trauma. Try as I might, with every cleansing ritual and every chemical compound, I am utterly unable to fully cleanse it. The corruption is foundational. The practical dangers are immediate and suffocating. There is virtually no natural ventilation in this structure. As we moved through the main corridor, the air immediately felt heavier, colder, and denser. I could instantly detect Carbonith's presence, a profound, stifling effect on the breathable air. It is very hard, no, impossible, to rid the house of his atmospheric oppression. The architects of this place never designed it to contain these kinds of monsters. It simply doesn't have the appropriate ventilation to cycle the air of literal existential dread. We have no choice but to manually air the house for the duration of our brief, necessary visits. Even though these horrors are securely locked in specialized containment cells, their cages, when I open the towering windows, I am gripped by the fear of a potential monster escape, but the alternative is worse. Should they begin to come close to suffocation, the resultant panic, to have them fear for their own lives, would be catastrophic. Their fear triggers their greatest, most destructive abilities. It is a precarious balance between keeping them contained enough and keeping them comfortable enough not to destroy the fabric of reality itself. Within the deep confines of this house are the 5 constant monsters. I have named them this because they remain. They are the unmoving axis of the house's evil. I hesitate to call them strong, as that implies virtue, but let's say they remain profoundly present, and have done so for many, agonizing months, resisting all efforts at nullification. Their number includes Orphana, whose desperate, endless wails do not echo, but rather create a futureless hollow of pure anguish, consuming any sense of hope within range. Meteorus, who threatens the very structural integrity of the building with his immense, fluctuating mass, causing the walls to constantly groan under the stress. Phalith, whose strengthening presence does not simply touch you, but actively desiccates your skin, and worse, works to subtly dissolve your bones from the inside out. Gauntmao, the master of disorientation, who not only constantly rearranges the hallways of the house in geometric impossibilities, but performs the same trick on the hallways of your mind. Carbonith, the physical embodiment of suffocation, who overwhelms the life-sustaining air and simultaneously emits the thick, odious sludge of ages, a viscous residue of all the house's.
We stand here, in the heart of the lull, breathing shallowly, surrounded by the quiet, intact cages that hold the 5 fundamental reasons we may never truly leave this place alive. Occasionally, a new corridor will open, or perhaps I should say a previously unknown corridor, for nothing here is new. A door will stand ajar, and we must cross the threshold for a new monster to become known to us. Some become constant, others are passing, like Needlet, Houndling, and Skule. Then there is the broken open room. We call it this because it contains a monstrous cage, bars wrenched apart by force, still contorted into the impressions of the wrathful fists that did it. A hole was opened in the wall beyond, which is the only other exit from the house. The entrance to the broken open room sometimes evades me, and for that I am glad. The monsters wax and wane in their strength, not with the moon, but seemingly with their own orbits, sometimes dim and dormant for many months, other times floodlit and feisty in a day. Herc and I have our routine. On every visit, we must first assess their condition. We do the rounds today. All seem unusually quiet, except Gauntmaw, who hurled his rattling bones against his bars, growls shaking every part of his atrophied body, and Orphana, whose wails carried the vibrations of every soul entreating the universe for the parents it no longer has. Herc went to replace Fallot's cooling water, and I steeled myself outside Orphana's room. It's a cliché, but our tasks fall along gendered lines. He is better equipped to take on the physical tasks, such as cooling Falloth, chipping meteors, and cleaning up after Carbonith. I, Meg, see to comforting Orphana and feeding Gauntmaw. Orphana's distress is waxing as of late. When I entered her room, I saw a mess on the floor of Play-Doh, cutters and shaped, surrounded by a now mostly indeterminate mix of colors, offcuts of twisted anthropomorphic figures. I quickly scooped up the detritus and hurled it out the window. It flew downwards into the thick gunmetal clouds. They are always there, and I do not know what exactly lies beneath, but no matter where I throw the items, they always return home.
You are not supposed to let them in, I scolded Orphana, who did not break her scream. She cannot speak, in any case. I should not have used my words so harshly. This is not how to care appropriately for Orphana. She wails not from one seeking mouth, but many. They are innumerable with corrupted, decaying teeth, and cover every inch of her eyeless frame, forever bent double. Pink pajamas stretch over her distended ribcage, haunted by the specters of rainbows and unicorns, threads chewed loose as tiny mouths gnaw away at the fabric. The lips are encrusted, bleeding, sore from biting. Every mouth ululates with some horrible facet of a 5-year-old's grief, a hand unheld, a comfort unwhispered, a way unguided. Just a cry from one alone is unbearable. From several is a psychosis, and from all at once, I have never heard it. I called her name loudly, hoping for a moment of recognition, for her to let me in. Orphana, I called. It's okay. They're going to be okay. I never say who they are, but this reassures her. The sound, though abating, beat me down. I expended no energy on thought, saying the first thing which comes to my mind. I looked at the books. Everybody's safe, Orphana. Hush. Want a story? There's a break in the crying. I'd filled her cage-side library only with stories in which parents remain alive and well. I grabbed the first one and read. But speech, even just delivering words from the page, was dredged from me like a body from the river. At last, Orphana slumped into quiet. With all else calm, I hoped I was no longer needed in the monster house tonight. I found Herc outside the east hallway boot room, having finished venting Falloth and recirculating his cooling water. He squeezed my hand. I'll take Gauntmaw and close the windows, he said, knowing Orphana drained me. For another day, the monster house is contained. 61 months, 6 days. I did not want to be back so soon, but a child was crying. Orphana would not settle. I went alone, always vastly more unpleasant, but how could I ask Herc to join me again so soon after our last visit? The corridors themselves seem accusatory when walked alone, the portraits and mounted heads of games staring with silent blame. A stuffed otter perched between drawing room and lounge bares its teeth in reproach. I became keeper of this place before I met Herc, and in those days the burden was far heavier. Every shake of the building felt like Materius's explosive form would, with little warning, destroy the building. I did not understand how to properly attend to Faleth, and through neglect my skin began to flake. In those days I did not understand my purpose. I thought the monsters would go away. I know they cannot be killed. I tried everything I could to keep Herc from the monster house, thinking that he would naturally be horrified by what dwelt within, that he would see the shadows of this place cast under my eyes. But my absences became too frequent, too suspicious, and in concern for my welfare, one evening he followed me. I did not realize this until I came upon him in the great hall, eyes fixed on the ceiling mural depicting Beowulf. In that moment, I realized how similar he appeared to the warrior overhead. I assumed it was because I found him heroic. I think now perhaps I foresaw his aptitude for handling monsters. Instead of fleeing, he absorbed the house with wary reverence, as if to understand me, he must first understand this place. He moved through its corridors with steady courage, undaunted by Materius's titanic frame or the horrifying pallor of Gauntmaw. The last thing I expected was his offer of help. "Confronting demons is always easier done in company," he said. But in those days we had fewer monsters. One person could contend with them alone, though only barely. After our first child was born, Herc shouldered the weight of the monster house for us both. Yet I could sense overwhelm, and eventually he sat me down. "Another constant," he said, interlocking our fingers. "I'm sorry. I can't handle her." I bowed my head. "And now she proves the most grievous of them all. Her unrest unsettles them all, I know it. Her wailing will not be impeded by bricks and mortar. Skirting boards only seem to transport and amplify it. The other monsters loathe it. Her cries summoned me down the corridor. Toys were strewn everywhere. Papers drifted across the floor covered in stick figures with mouths for eyes. I snatched them up and cast them through the window."
She was crying for a litany of absence, a birthday unremembered, a laugh unheard, a fear unsoothed. The sound insisted itself upon me until my eyes burned, and her thought pressed against mine. "Let me speak to the children." I did not get angry. I am their protector. As Herc says, emotions do not give me strength, and he knows strength. And she was crying for a litany of absences, a birthday unremembered, a laugh unheard, a fear unsoothed. The sound insisted itself upon me until my eyes burned and her thought pressed against mine. "Let me speak to the children." I did not get angry. I am their protector. As Herc says, emotions do not give me strength, and he knows strength. Instead, I sing. When the boat comes in, lavender's blue, all through the night. And I was there, almost, all through the night, watching a galaxy wheel from east to west as over and over, childlike melodies eddy my throat. I cannot continue. 61 months, 10 days. I have neglected to mention that as the monsters grow stronger or more fearsome, the cage bars weaken. The house is pervaded with rising damp, rotten corners. It edges closer to surrender. I have dealt with escapes before. Herc has not. I had allowed Meteorus to grow unchecked, failed to chip him back as the tools laid out demanded. His rocky mass groaned and pressed outward until the room itself became a cliff face, the iron bars bending before his weight. Eventually they yielded, and he was able to force his way out. He was slow, but his movements were ruinous, A door smashed, a wall torn asunder, a ceiling in fragments. I gave chase and lured him to a wing of the house I call the Hunter's Lodge, although its contents are more sinister. From a drawer there I seized a case of grenades. One by one I cast them until his form was reduced to rubble. At the core I found him, a single indestructible stone. I pounded on it with a hammer until I could no longer move my arms. He could not be destroyed. I swore it would not happen again. Orfana's cries pressed upon my eardrums without cessation. What she felt became more complex. The mouths vacillate between a shifting kaleidoscope of terrors, a cry unanswered, a wound undressed, a bully unchallenged. I could not break through, and she would not listen. I just wanted her to stop screaming. The noise corroded my soul, and I could see that rust on her cage bars blistering roughly, cracking under my fingers as I pulled closer to the cage. I have never touched her, even though I know it could help. I cannot bring myself to. But in that moment, she was beyond letting herself be vulnerable. She flinched violently as I came closer. No story, no song could penetrate her cries. The noise was unbroken. She made it less a house and more a few feeble walls surrounding countless voids. Herc had done the rounds.
"Can't you deal with her?" he asked, holding his ears. Despite his own formidable muscularity, he is tender. I understand his distress. The noise wakes me ragged, too. "I've tried everything," I said. It was as if some taut cord had snapped in him. "I'll take the others," he said, "all of them, for however long she's like this. Just focus on her. Do anything you can." His eyes were pleading. I gave him the lie at the forefront of my mind. "I'll think of something." But to do that, I would have to dispel the sense memories, the gatekeepers of any rational thought. Brittle rust giving way to my grip, mold spores in my nostrils, and that awful, awful howl. 61 months, 18 days. We lingered before the door, reluctant to enter the monster house. Yet I knew the consequences of hesitation. There was no sound. A heart misses a beat, and the body answers with adrenaline. I pushed the door open an inch. Nothing. Another inch. Still nothing. The checkerboard flooring mocked my lack of forethought. Herc couldn't even move his gaze to the hallway, dawdling behind me, hanging back. A wave of stifling, tainted air rolled from the corridor, and I choked, retching as I moved forward. Scattered about on the floor were teddies, which I tiptoed around, Herc booted to the side. I looked left, right, up. Then I saw her. Knees and hands planted against the ceiling, her tiny body inverted above me, neck craned in dreadful expectation. Her mouths gaped, hungering in suspended agony. I screamed. I couldn't stop myself. With every mouth she wailed. I recoiled in the full, rancid breadth of her tragedy. A nightmare unacknowledged, a tyrant unchecked, a helper unsummoned. She fell upon me, and I felt the wetness of her many little mouths wide and unhinged across my skin, marking me with the effluence of their despair. "Shh, Orfana." I began to try and soothe her, though I was sobbing. "It'll be all right."
Herc just leapt. He seized her from me, holding her briefly before a look of abject disgust crossed his face. He threw her from him, slamming her to the floor. Her cries became screams. I should have reached for her, but Herc grasped for her first. She writhed, spider-like, away from his fingers, and I watched in horror as she vanished through the open door. "Stay here," said Herc. "You sort the others." "I said, but he'd already slammed the door behind him. I tried to follow, but it would not open. Something was very wrong. I ran round the house, throwing open windows, with only the gunmetal sheet below. What if I leapt? I'd never contemplated it before. I had one foot on the window ledge before I thought better of it, imagining the lacerations from passing through freezing clouds. I knew what my only other option was, the path of last resort, the single hidden fire exit in the collapsing structure of my mind, the broken open room. I'd never consciously looked for its entrance before, but memory keeps pathways as much for avoidance as for use, so I knew the way was internal, buried deep. Yet it was harder to find than I expected. I wasted precious, anxious time taking different mental turns, only to arrive at the same recurring block, the unsettling image of the bared teeth otter. The house groaned, a seismic shudder that signaled Meteoropus awoke, stirring his colossal mass, but I was singularly focused on my desperate task. It felt as though I had been walking for hours through the shifting corridors of my own self until I found myself at last in the hallway of ancestors. I sprinted past the familiar incongruous relics, the dusty sports paraphernalia, the imposing old drinks cabinet, to the former private study of the master of the house. More than any other space here, this room felt like a cell. The door stood unnervingly open as I approached. Desperation to find an exit, any exit, drove me in, only for my relief to instantly curdle into panic. The escape route I had counted on, the wall that was supposed to lead out, had been boarded up. Herc had never mentioned he was going to fix it. A helpful act, no doubt, he thought, but in doing so, he had trapped me. This fact, however, paled before the profound, terrifying anomaly the room held. Far from being empty or broken open, this room was undeniably lived in. Children's plates and cutlery, tiny and brightly colored, littered the table. Their small bedding lay crumpled and intertwined on one side of the monstrous cage. Scrawled on the wall in outsized childlike letters, a desperate, heartbreaking message. "Mummy, love." On the other side of the cage, neatly folded, I blanched, cold nausea gripping my stomach, was my own bedding. Then came the heavy footsteps in the corridor behind me.
"How did you get here, Meg?" It was Herc, his face impassive, a fresh, sickly bruise rising on his cheekbone. "Children have been here," I stated, the obvious fact a horrifying accusation. "Yes," he said, offering absolutely nothing else. "How did they get here? Why are they here?" I demanded, spinning to face him. His gaze was cold and level. "Where did you think they go while you're busy?" "This is a monster's room," I whispered, the air thick with the residue of terror and neglect. "Yes?" The silence that followed was broken only by the phlegmy inhalations of Gauntmaw, the sound creeping closer, distorting the very dimensions of the corridor outside. "Where is Orphana?" I asked, a fresh wave of panic cresting. His expression remained unmoving, unnervingly calm. "She is in the world now." He told me he couldn't handle her. I should never have let him go alone. I heard the distant, dreadful sound of iron bars straining, scraping on rock. Materius. That sound was not just noise, it was a loud, apocalyptic omen. I looked at Herc and noticed the deep, disturbing shadows under his eyes, the exact kind I always feared he would see mirrored in mine. His muscles twitched, straining against his shirt. "What's happening here?" I demanded, the question collapsing under its own weight. His shadow stretched out behind him. It was much too big, a profound, impossible distortion of light, and ran up the wall, across the ceiling, looming over me like a colossal, hungry entity. The question I truly needed to ask, the key to all this terror, I could no longer grasp. I was no longer able to form the thought. Gauntmore's influence was taking hold. He stepped closer, extending a hand. I saw his veins, suddenly excessive and corded, his muscles extraordinary in number and definition. I didn't take it. He gave a gesture like he didn't care, flicked his hand with casual power, and took hold of one of the thick, twisted cage bars. His fingers closed around the jagged indentations in a fist. They fit. I turned to run,
but the entrance I came through was gone. There was no door. I hammered hysterically on the wall. Where had it gone?
Somebody hasn't been tending to Materius, and now he tests his bars, he said, slowly, his voice calm, instructive, but with a profound, final threat. Somebody hasn't been cooling Faloth, and now his rage is incendiary.
And someone, he finished, a cold smirk replacing the calm, has starved Gauntmaw. So now you are confused. I looked at the children's bed covers, crumpled, intertwined and stained inside the bars of the cage. I tried, with every collapsing fiber of my being, to remember how I had sworn to protect them. "This is all my fault," I whispered, the words the only coherent thought my mind could settle on. The massive shadow on the ceiling flexed. Herc shook his head, the pity in his eyes instantly twisting into a raw, frightening snarl. "Meg," he said, his voice now a low, rumbling growl, "you don't have to worry anymore. You are in the house now." Even his simple words seemed to carry the abnormal, monstrous strength I had failed to notice in him until this final, exposed moment. The terrifying truth settled over me like a freezing concrete slab. This is a house of monsters. And with my terrifying newfound clarity, I knew the deepest secret of all. I am one of them.